Alright, so Roger Waters is back in the news again for saying stupid things about Ozzy Osbourne, and in this case it comes from an interview he gave with Piers Morgan, where he was asked to apologize for calling Ozzy Osbourne an idiot and saying that Black Sabbath's music had no value, and he actually did apologize in the interview, but then he went on to say some comments that are getting more traction than the apology itself. I want to talk about those, and I want to talk about what is the really big irony in all of this that everyone seems to be missing. So first of all, in the interview, when pressed on whether he regretted his original remarks about Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, Waters said, quote, "I regret nothing in life except that I haven't been more successful in getting people to understand how important it is that we as a human race recognize and empathize with all our brothers and sisters all over the world and make certain that they have equal human rights one with another under international law," end quote. Now let's be clear about something up front. This isn't Waters saying, "I'm sorry I offended Ozzy Osbourne," or "I regret I was failing to communicate my moral vision." This is Waters saying, "I would rather talk about something important here. Rather than interpersonal conflicts, I want to talk about global politics and human justice and these things." Okay, here's the irony that struck me immediately. If you take out the phrase "under international law" from what Waters said here, what is left is this: empathy, shared humanity, the horror of war, the cost of power, and the suffering of ordinary people. And that is exactly what Black Sabbath spent their entire career expressing and making music about. So songs like War Pigs, Children of the Grave, Electric Funeral, Hand of Doom, they aren't anti-intellectual, they aren't idiotic, they're on the exact same page as Roger Waters, and while they're not calling for international law, they're calling for everything else that Waters says that he prioritizes. The difference is stylistic, not moral. And Roger Waters approaches the same themes, but he uses a lot of abstraction and narrative distance and symbolism and political frameworks, where Sabbath just steps directly into dread, fear, and lived experience. So I think when Waters dismisses Sabbath's music, he's rejecting them for having shallow content, but he's not listening. He's failing to recognize that there's a parallel moral language going on in their music and in the music of Pink Floyd. The other thing that he says in the interview is, quote, "I don't like people who bite the heads off bats." Well, in this case, the facts totally contradict Waters, and they matter. So I've done a video on this, you can look it up in the archives if you like, that discusses the bat biting incident in detail, and here are the facts. The bat was already dead. Ozzy thought it was a rubber toy. People had been throwing rubber snakes and bats and other things up on stage throughout the tour. So he picked up this bat, he thought it was rubber, so he bit it as a joke. He immediately realized something was wrong. He had to go and seek medical treatment afterwards. He wasn't being cruel, it wasn't some sort of satanic ritual, it wasn't a calculated act. It was a dangerous and kind of stupid accident, but the mythology of it became much bigger than the actual incident. So, in this sense, if you're looking at the caricature of Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, then you're not seeing any of the reality of it. You don't actually need to make comments that are so incredibly sweeping, like, well, Black Sabbath's music is pointless. Well, you aren't listening to it. This is what I think made me want to make this video in the first place, is the idea that when I was a young kid listening to Sabbath and Pink Floyd, songs like War Pigs and Pigs on the Wing occupied the same kind of poetic space in my mind. They were the same kind of anti-authoritarian, anti-war, anti-control, and they had no friction between them. The same can be said for like Paranoid and Another Brick in the Wall, or the whole Wall album. To me, Sabbath's music and Pink Floyd's music are very much closer in theme, not in sound, than Waters is giving credit for. And I was always a huge fan of Roger Waters' lyrics and a huge fan of Geezer Butler's lyrics, and I don't think that there's any friction between them at all. In fact, I think they're occupying kind of the same space. Black Sabbath didn't speak in the language of international law. They spoke in the language of warning sirens, and history suggests that people listened. And I would think that this could be something that Waters could come to respect over time if he would open his mind and open his ears. And in the interview that he gave, he left the door open to have a conversation with Jack Osbourne on a one-to-one level. And in that case, I think there's a chance for them to straighten this all up by covering the points that I just covered. One is Sabbath was a much deeper band than Roger Waters is giving them credit for, but number two, Ozzy Osbourne never did bite the head off of a bat in the way that Roger Waters thinks that he did. So let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below.
Music Guru here, asking you to help us on our march to 10,000 subscribers.